The reaction still coming in to yesterday's UN General Assembly vote demanding a ceasefire. Canada was among 153 countries that voted in favour of the non-binding resolution. That followed a joint statement issued by Prime Minister Trudeau and his counterparts in Australia and New Zealand in calling for a return to the humanitarian pause that ended earlier this month. The UN vote is a marked change in position for the Trudeau government, and there is strong reaction to it. Some are praising the move from Canada. Many members of the Jewish community and at least 2 Liberal MPs are expressing disappointment. Some critics say the demand for a ceasefire does not go far enough, though, and this was the scene outside the Liberal caucus holiday party in Ottawa. Protesters gathered and called on the government to do even more to end the fighting. Janice McGregor is in Ottawa to bring us more reaction to all of this. Janice, it is, as I mentioned, leading to division even within the Liberal Party, this vote in favour of a declaration for a ceasefire. The Prime Minister has spoken about this directly at that caucus holiday party. Talk a little bit about how this is affecting things within the Liberal ranks.
Yeah, and the attempts at nuance yesterday. Look, I think with so many strong emotions, we've seen the people on the streets, so many sharp opinions here, there probably is no stand any Canadian government could take that would be able to please everyone here. It is notable yesterday internationally that Canada was acting alongside allies, for example, first with that statement, the joint statement with Australia and New Zealand, calling for more efforts towards a, quote, more sustainable ceasefire. But then also doing that at the same time as U.S. President Joe Biden was sharpening his criticism of the Netanyahu government. And Canada's ambassador at the UN, Bob Ray, was also pointing out that while, yes, Canada did shift its vote, voting for that main resolution, calling for a humanitarian ceasefire, it had also voted in favor of amendments that Austria and the U.S. had tried to bring, more explicitly condemning the terrorist attacks by Hamas, making clear that it is Hamas and other groups in Gaza that must release their hostages. The political danger here, though, for the Trudeau government is that in trying to land on a balanced position, these nuances satisfy no one, including inside the Liberal ranks, where previously we've told you that Muslim donors, for example, had said that they would be not supporting the Liberal Party anymore because of insufficient support for Palestinian civilians. And now, you know, the party's hearing from Jewish donors concerned about softened support for Israel. Prime Minister Trudeau, as you mentioned, was at a holiday party last night talking to Liberals in his ranks. Here's what he said.
What's happening in the Middle East is reverberating around the world, across Canada, and within our Liberal Party. I've spoken with many of you personally, and I know how extremely difficult it has been. Some of you are directly impacted or have loved ones who are. It's been tough, and we're having hard but necessary conversations together.
Now, our colleagues watching that speech noticed that he did not explicitly say the word ceasefire in his remarks last night. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly has used that word a few times, talking about what's going on in Gaza and the need for a pause more recently. But you mentioned the 2 Liberal MPs that have broken ranks, spoke out against the vote that was cast at the UN yesterday. There were actually 3 Liberal MPs alongside former Justice Minister Irwin Cotler at a news conference yesterday with some Bloc and Conservative MPs as well, drawing attention to what the families of hostages in Gaza are going through. 2 of them, Marco Mendicino, Anthony Housefather, had taken a trip to Israel earlier this fall, supported by Jewish groups, and they had, been very clear in their support for the position of the Israeli government here. The official opposition also very strong, consistent in its advocacy for the Israeli government's perspective on this. Here is what a Conservative MP at that news conference yesterday, Shuvaloy Majumdar, is from Calgary, he said when a reporter raised the issue of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
The assumption that you have made in your question is that there is some equivalence between the democratic state of Israel and the terrorists that are Hamas. We are talking about a conflict in which was provoked initiated and sustained by Hamas. Hamas is responsible for everything that has happened since October 7th.
On the other hand, the NDP has been more explicit in calling for a ceasefire since all this began. Here's Peter Julian, for example, talking to reporters yesterday after the government's first statement came out.
NDP has been pushing for this from the very beginning. Jagmeet Singh, Heather McPherson, our foreign affairs critic, we've believed it's vitally important to push that Canada's voice needs to push for a release of all hostages, an immediate ceasefire, humanitarian aid going into Gaza. And the NDP is going to continue to push on this. Every day we are up in the House of Commons calling for a ceasefire. We'll continue to do that.
And indeed, McPherson out with a statement last night, Heather, questioning whether this perceived shift in position on the Trudeau government's part would be followed by meaningful actions, or whether it was just lip service because Liberal donors were starting to flee the party.
Janice, thank you very much. There's Janice McGregor in Ottawa with reaction again.